If you drive Highway 1 south of Pacifica, you'll pass a trailhead with a parking lot and a gate. The pavement on the other side looks like a normal road. Striped lanes, concrete barriers, the occasional turnout. But there's no traffic on it. No cars, no trucks. Just hikers and cyclists using a 1.2-mile stretch of abandoned highway that hangs off a cliff above the Pacific. That's the old Devil's Slide Road. Caltrans closed it in 2013 when the tunnels opened. But the reason it took until 2013 is what this case file is about. The tunnel that replaced it wasn't a new idea. Caltrans had studied it as far back as 1974 and found it viable. They buried the study. For decades, the agency pushed a different plan entirely. A 6-lane freeway over Montara Mountain, while the cliff road kept failing, kept closing, and kept bleeding the communities on either side dry. Businesses laying off staff. Commutes stretching from 40 minutes to 3 hours, and small towns cut off from the rest of the county every time the mountain moved. The answer to why is sitting in a 1993 internal memo that a local activist pried loose with a Freedom of Information Act request. He called it the smoking gun. The numbers in that memo are what finally broke the logjam. Highway 1 at Devil's Slide opened in 1937. For about 600 feet, the road clings to a cliff that crests 900 feet above the Pacific Ocean. The rock face is a mix of granite, shale, and sandstone. Granite holds, shale and sandstone don't. Ken Lajoie is a retired geologist with the U.S. Geological Survey who spent years mapping this coastline. He started in 1970, and what he found wasn't just erosion. The shale and sandstone layers beneath the road produce both shallow and deep-seated slides, triggered by rain and earthquakes alike. Drivers saw rocks on the pavement. Lajoie saw a mountain in the process of letting go. Add it all up, and this road has been closed for more than 700 days across its history. Nearly 2 full years of closure spread across decades of patch jobs and emergency repairs that never addressed the thing actually moving underneath. Then came January 1995. A winter storm hit, and a 160-foot section buckled and slipped 5 feet. The damage alone cost $1.5 million. Repairs ran another $3 million on top of that. And the road stayed shut for 158 days, over 5 months. John Barber owned the Moss Beach Distillery. Within weeks of the closure, he laid off 50 employees and watched revenue drop 40%. Mitch Reed had moved his business to Moss Beach exactly 1 month before the slide. His 10-minute commute turned into an hour and a half. Commuters who normally needed 40 minutes found themselves detouring south to Highway 92 and looping back, 2 to 3 hours each way. Caltrans kept patching, but a 1960 Division of Highways project report spells out what the agency was really doing. State engineers wrote, in their own words, that they didn't intend to start work on a bypass. They were waiting for a major slip-out or slide to justify tapping federal emergency funds. Read that again. The road wasn't just unstable. Caltrans was deliberately waiting for it to fail, because a disaster would unlock the money they needed for the plan they'd already chosen. Caltrans had a plan. They'd had it since 1958, a 6-lane, 7-mile freeway bypass over Montara Mountain, running from Linda Mar in Pacifica all the way to the Half Moon Bay Airport. Not a fix for a dangerous cliff road, a growth corridor. San Mateo County's 1960 plan projected 200,000 residents on the coast by 1990. The Westinghouse Corporation had already bought 8,000 acres around Half Moon Bay, Montara, and El Granada. The bypass wasn't a traffic solution. It was the spine of a development machine that would have turned the rural coast into something closer to Daly City. The road itself told the story of what that bypass would look like. Caltrans said they'd stripe it for 2 lanes, but the roadbed was graded between 79 and 101 feet wide, wider than the Golden Gate Bridge. Chris Thalog, a Montara resident and former Sierra Club spokesman, called it publicly what it was, the widest 2-lane road in the country. In 1972, the Sierra Club and the Committee for Green Foothills sued Caltrans for skipping the environmental impact statement required under federal law. They won. Caltrans ignored the ruling and shelved the project, waiting for an emergency that would let them restart without the legal fight. That same year, the agency quietly studied a tunnel alternative and confirmed it was viable, then buried that study too. The late 1970s brought a new scheme: excavate the unstable cliff material and dump it on the slope below. Federal officials managing the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary shut that down before it started. No dumping rock into the ocean. Then Governor George Deukmejian took office in 1983 and put the original Freeway engineers back in charge. The new Martini Creek alignment stretched 4.5 miles over the mountain through McNee Ranch State Park, past Martini Creek, and down to Montara State Beach. Cuts and fills up to 106 feet wide and 275 feet high. Bill Bechtel, a retired engineer who lived in Montara, said it would have destroyed the community. The turning point didn't come from a courtroom or a vote. It came from a fax machine. In 1995, Mitch Reed, the same man whose commute had gone from 10 minutes to 90, filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the Caltrans office in Oakland. The next day, a dozen pages came through the fax. One of them was a 1993 internal memo from James Roberts, then chief of the Division of Structures at Caltrans. The memo said it plainly: if the purpose is to bypass the slide, a 2-lane single-bore tunnel should be the first choice. For years, Caltrans had been telling the public the tunnel cost twice as much as the bypass. The memo showed the costs were nearly identical. The agency had been lying about the numbers, and now Reed had it in their own handwriting. He called it the smoking gun. The activists who got the memo into the public record called themselves the Tunnelistas. They printed yellow and black Think Tunnel bumper stickers and blanketed San Mateo County with newsletters and fact sheets, month after month. Ann Forrester, a Montara resident, showed up at public hearings dressed as Captain Tunnel, red leotard, tights, a cape with a bright yellow tee, and gathered signatures door to door between appearances. When the group got turned away from the Half Moon Bay 4th of July parade for being too political, they walked the parade route anyway and slapped bumper stickers onto floats as they passed. They collected 34,000 signatures. Measure T went on the November 1996 ballot. In August 1995, the Federal Highway Administration, having seen the same memo Reed had, ordered Caltrans to conduct a fresh cost comparison between the tunnel and the bypass. Zoe Kirstein Tucker, a Moss Beach resident who ran the organizing campaign, remembered what a Caltrans spokesperson told a reporter around that time. They'd evaluate the tunnel and find it too expensive. The internal memo was already in the public record. The spokesperson either didn't know it existed or didn't care. Measure T passed with 74% of the vote. San Mateo County formally changed its preference from the bypass to the tunnel. But a vote doesn't pour concrete. Congressman Tom Lantos had locked in $50 million in federal emergency funds for Devil's Slide back in the early 1980s. After Measure T passed, Senator Barbara Boxer got the site classified as a continuing and ongoing federal emergency. That single designation let the tunnel bypass the normal state transportation funding queue and draw directly from federal emergency relief. Kirstein Tucker called it the last major hurdle. Ground broke May 6, 2005. Boring started September 17, 2007. The North Bore broke through on September 30, 2010, with news cameras and speeches. The tunnels opened March 26, 2013, nearly 17 years after the vote, and 55 years after Caltrans first drew up the bypass. The Tom Lantos tunnels are the second and third longest road tunnels in California. The northbound bore runs 4,149 feet. The southbound runs 4,008 feet. Each is 30 feet wide, 22 feet high, and they sit 60 feet apart inside the mountain. That's a lot of rock to move through. Kiewit Corporation used the new Austrian tunneling method, which sounds clinical until you understand what it means in practice. Crews excavated 3 to 6 feet at a time, then stopped. The mining engineer examined every new face of rock, read the fracture patterns and soil types, and chose the support method on the spot before anyone advanced another inch. Skip Sauco, the Caltrans project manager, described it as slow and deliberate by design, because the mountain is full of the same unpredictable mix of granite, sandstone, and shale that had been moving under the road for decades. By the time they finished, the project had moved roughly 225,000 cubic yards of earth and poured 80,000 cubic yards of concrete. It also needed twin 1,000-foot bridges to span Shamrock Ranch, after biologists flagged the area as habitat for the endangered California red-legged frog. Those bridges alone added about $34 million. The final cost depends on who you ask. Kiewitz puts it at $268 million. KQED's reporting lands at $342 million. The gap comes from what you count: the bridges, the environmental mitigation work, the years of studies before ground ever broke. Either way, it came in well above the $50 to $70 million that an independent panel had projected back in 1995. And what got built isn't just a tube through a hill. The tunnels run 32 jet fans for ventilation, fire detection and suppression systems, carbon monoxide and nitrogen oxide detectors, closed-circuit cameras, emergency call boxes, electronic message signs, and a system that catches overheight vehicles before they ever reach the portal. 9 cross passages connect the 2 bores for emergency evacuation. 3 additional chambers between the bores give emergency vehicles somewhere to stage. The engineers didn't just bore through a mountain, they built a sealed safety system inside it. The trade-off is narrow, 1 lane per bore. No shoulder, a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. If someone breaks down, every vehicle behind them stops too. In March 2013, Caltrans shut the old coastal road for good and pushed all traffic into the tunnels. The 1.2-mile stretch of Cliff Road became the Devil's Slide Trail, managed by San Mateo County Parks. The same pavement that trapped commuters for 158 days in 1995 is now a hiking path. The tunnels solve the specific problem they were built for. Rain no longer washes rock across your windshield. The deep-seated slide still moves. Ken Lajoie, who mapped this mountain in 1970, would see the same unstable layers today, but drivers are no longer sitting on top of it when it does. What the tunnel created is a different set of constraints. Caltrans schedules overnight closures for maintenance, electrical work, and system checks. Both bores went dark in October 2020 for construction. The southbound tunnel closed from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. for 3 consecutive nights in December 2023. When the tunnel closes, there's no other route through the mountain at that point. The detour is the same 2 to 3 hour loop around Highway 92 that people were driving in 1995. The single lane and 45-mile-per-hour limit mean the system has almost no buffer. An overheight truck triggers the detection system before the portal and stops everything behind it. A breakdown stops the entire bore. The old road failed dramatically and visibly, with rocks on the pavement and fissures you could photograph. The tunnel fails quietly, with a backup that has nowhere to go. The risk didn't disappear. It changed shape. Before the tunnel, rocks could hit your car. Now you sit in a sealed tube with 1 lane, no shoulder, and 9 cross passages as your only exit options. Both are manageable. Neither is zero. The tunnel works. It just works differently than the Cliff Road failed. What the tunnelistas actually won was a paper fight. They got a bureaucracy to reverse a 40-year plan, not by protesting at the right hearings, but by getting the agency's own internal documents into the public record. The 1993 memo didn't create the tunnel. It removed the last argument Caltrans had for the bypass. Once the cost numbers were public, the freeway plan collapsed under its own weight. If you want to see what would have existed instead, drive up toward Montara Mountain and look at the chaparral. Somewhere through that ridge, a 6-lane cut would have come down toward the coast. The Westinghouse development would have followed. The rural towns that fought for 3 decades to stay rural would look different today. The Cliff Road would still be there too, still moving, still waiting for the next major slip-out. Instead, there's a trail where the road used to be, and a mountain with 2 tunnels through it that took 55 years to build. That's what the receipts show. An agency that buried its own findings, a community that dug them back out, and a stretch of coastline that got a hiking trail instead of a 6-lane freeway. More case files are coming. Stories where the documents tell you what actually happened, not what anyone wanted you to believe. If this one surprised you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And send it to someone who thinks infrastructure just happens.